on a personal level, not just in terms of the organization, not just in terms of policing, but in you being a human, God-fearing, God-loving police officer, law enforcement officer, how is that affecting you? And how do you deal with really a job that I assume you got into to serve and protect, being told that you're garbage?
Well, the first word that kind of comes to mind is almost sadness. When you look at your community or your country or nation as a whole, however you want to segment it, that you have these groups of people that just feel like they are not on the same plane, and you can never necessarily expect everybody to be on the same plane, but now it's shifted to where you almost have to be one or the other. And it's sad because I feel like when I talk to somebody, it's automatic. If you're not on this part of it, like if we're not on the same team here, we can't be on the same team anywhere. And I just don't think it's that much of a binary issue. I mean, kind of like he said, it's just really the root of it is people just want to be treated fairly. And law enforcement is who they're used to being that personified representation of not being treated fairly. And that's why they take a lot of the angst and the anger from the communities. And that's sad because you just feel like we're not really looking for different things, because I know most law enforcement officers that I work with, if not all, like you said, they really just want to be involved in their community, serve their community, do as good of a job as they can. And then there's certain portions of the community that feel like they're just so downtrodden, they're not being given a fair shake, which I can only imagine is an incredible, kind of discontent that can breed. But when you look at it from the outside as a person, I like to think I'm looking at both communities and going, we're really not looking for different things. We're just kind of not getting to the heart of the issue, kind of like you alluded to. And it's frustrating and it's sad. It's the first reaction is kind of sadness, like, wow, I hate to see that our communities are like supposed to be growing farther and farther apart. And then what can we do about it? I feel like the solution might be a little bit simple if we can just be honest with each other and delve to the issue. But it doesn't feel like a lot of the narratives really want to do that. It feels like the narratives are kind of more interested in divisiveness. But, yeah.
How about you? What does it do to you personally?
Well, it's like, take for example, like the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think it can, if you want to be honest with, like, what can be frustrating for a police officer, and I mean, we're looking at July 4th weekend right now, and this weekend's been a very violent weekend across the country, and we've got in Atlanta an 8-year-old girl who's driving like with her mom and ends up getting shot and killed for no apparent reason. And we've got kids that are just being shot, over the weekend for just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, violence breaking out. And the movement, it's hard. Like, I understand why something as terrible as what happened to George Floyd drives the movement and drives the protest. But it feels to me like the Black Lives Matter only gets going when there's been a police shooting, or there's been something that the police have done that we're going to lash out against. And I think what they're protesting with what happened with George Floyd is absolutely valid, and the movement and what's followed from that, I don't have a problem with. I mean, I think there needs to be a discussion and the voice needs to be there, and I just want the same passion that goes into those protests to go into like the protest of like what happened to this girl. And I'll give the mayor of Atlanta credit, as she has come out with a statement saying, you can't blame this on police. This is terrible, and it's just people carrying around guns and doing stupid things, and we can't allow this to happen with our communities. But I want to. It's not, all of these things should be tied together into this movement. It should be, you know, how great would it be, for me, what I would like to see as a police officer, I know there are several witnesses to what happened to this little girl. There should be a march in the street of we want justice for this little girl. We will not stand for someone to shoot an innocent 8-year-old girl in our community. This cannot be tolerated. The same way that what happened to George Floyd cannot be tolerated. We can't allow, we need to unite with our law enforcement partners to bring these people to justice. And there's such a divide, especially in Atlanta right now, with what's going on there between law enforcement and the communities they're there to serve, that we've lost that. And it breaks my heart. And I mean, what I do, I mean, my job in law enforcement is to combat violent gangs. And, you know, part of my job is to, you know, focus on and investigate violent offenders, people who have done terrible things in the community. And even when I investigate those crimes and I put those subjects in jail, it's heartbreaking to me to listen to them. I mean, I sat down, when I arrived in, this maybe getting too into the weeds, but when I arrived in, started my work in targeting violent gangs, we had the gang member we were targeting, you know, he was wreaking havoc in the cities. And he'd been known to commit at least one homicide, suspected of several more. And, you know, to a T, these communities wanted him to be taken off the street. And so we did, and we focused on his group, and we took him off the street. And I sat down and talked with him. And it's the same conversation I've had with a number of my offenders that I've arrested. And you know, he tells me about his childhood. He's like, you know, I've got a younger brother and older sister, and we're, ever since the age of 12, you know, I've never seen my dad. My mom's addicted to crack. And I've been on the street trying to provide for my brother and sister. And I've had to steal since I was 12. And it doesn't defend the actions that he's accused of, and he is facing justice, but he's a person too. And like, I feel for the people that I'm targeting, and realizing that this guy I targeted has several children who are gonna grow up now without a dad, and like watching the cycle continue and continue. It weighs on you. Like it weighs on me before all this happened, that part of it. But in this context, like, I'm supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement, but I really want to see it fully encompassed to supporting all Black lives. And I think there's a disconnect, or at least for me, like when you look at it from law enforcement, that you only care about the Black lives that are hurt by police. Like when we make a mistake, then the movement arises and the protests begin, and we're going to tear down the police. And every day since then, what have the police done wrong? What have the police done wrong? And yet on the other side, there's havoc breaking these communities apart, and it's their perception. And I know there are people in these communities that care and are saddened by what's happened to these kids this weekend. But like, there's no like rally to justice. There's no marching in the street. There's no like, let's wrap up these guys that did this and get justice for these people. And so, me personally, I would love to see like a connection there, where we need to solve our issues with policing, and if there's policies that we need to change and things that we need to do differently to prevent what happened to George Floyd and others from happening again, we need to do that. But we also need your help here. We also need the support of these communities so that these lives are not forgotten. Yeah. Because this happens at a far greater number than what happens to George Floyd. And it's heartbreaking. Yeah. For me personally to watch.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, a couple of things when each of you were sharing. First of all, there's a tension that I think we sit in our culture, in which, as a law enforcement officer, when a statement is made in any way that's flavored against the Black Lives Matter, which you were clear that you're not against it, but in any way that says, hey, let's expand this a little further. Let's look at justice and not just what it sounds like to me, what appears to be focus on police brutality. Not that it doesn't need to be focused on, but let's expand that a little bit. It sounds from a cultural ear like a critique, which then puts you to what you said in this polarity. It's either this or that. Okay, now you've made a statement that seems in some ways to challenge the status quo, and therefore now you're on the other side, and now we're talking about two different sides. And really the reason why we're having this conversation is to say, back to your point, that we're not on different sides. How do we bring the community together? How do we process this?